teams, yes, we started with software, but we didn't scale quick enough. We didn't take the opportunity to move it up and out of that area. But we were so successful. We in 2011, we won a replication award. In 2012, we had metrics that showed that we had deployed to 60% of the BDS software organizations. And we showed an increase in productivity, quality, throughput, and about $30 million of cost savings or cost avoidance over all of the different software organizations that we deployed this to. And in about 2013, they said, okay, so you deployed it to 60% of the software teams, how are they doing? So we developed a maturity metric to see how well they were doing. And one of the things that we never really ended up doing was to seeing how much of the organization had actually implemented Agile. And so you'd get this, hey, we did 60%. I think we, at one point in time, we got to 95% of the organizations, the software teams. But we still didn't know, did that mean one Agile team? Did that mean the whole organization had gone? There was nothing that we were measuring to say how deep the Agile got, just how many teams we had moving using Agile. In 2013, we started trying to expand it to engineering. We said, Scrum, it's not just for software. You can use it for other engineering disciplines as well. And that was an experiment, and it started going. We had some good support for it. On my F-22 story, we continued, we expanded into systems engineering and test, and we started looking at hardware, and we did scaling. So our entire organization was using Agile. We brought in the Scaled Agile framework slowly over time as it was released in 2011. And most of what I had done on F-22, I had actually modeled after what I'd seen Dean Leffingwell working on when he was writing his, he wrote his book called Scaling Software Agility, but before SAFe came out, he was actually blogging about what SAFe would be. And so we were kind of using some of those constructs along the way. We started changing our contracts. We started changing our processes. We started training our leaders. We started making it a transformation versus an implementation, and continued to have success on that. So much so that we started rolling it out beyond training systems into the rest of F-22. So awesome, we have great successes. What happened next? Well, this is where you say the word, be careful what you measure, and the metrics can kill you. As I was saying, we got to the point where we had penetrated more than 85% of the Agile teams in BDS, which is Boeing Defense. Our maturity metrics were on the rise. And all of a sudden, funding for the core team and coaching, gone. And why? Because we made it, right? We had all these awards. We had 85% of the teams. Our maturity metrics were on the rise. Programs continued to utilize Agile after that, but we started to backslide. So this was around 2014 to 2016. And it's unfortunate that this happened, because we had a good amount of energy going. And had we been able to convince the leaders that we weren't done, that you're never done, that you just can't stop with the coaching and the guidance and the growth, the continuous learning journey, we would not have had this gap in time where we really weren't advancing what we were doing. IT had lost their leadership earlier, And when we started new programs, they just went right back to the traditional way of working. They didn't even look at integrating Agile into their contracts. Now, I will say, and not that I'm trying to toot my own horn, but F22 continued. And not only did we continue to grow the use of Agile and scaled Agile within F22, we also, as an F22 community, and that includes both Boeing and Lockheed, influenced the direction of SAFE itself. And they started including systems engineering and hardware development. And they, the large solution layer was actually kind of created as a needed construct because of the complexity that we were describing to them as they were looking to develop those concepts. So since I was continuing to use it, and I really didn't want to like lose the motivation and of Agile within the company, I went back to grassroots and I started an internal community of practice in 2015. And I think it probably took me about 2 months, and I had 500 people already in the community of practice. So there was a lot of energy for knowledge around Agile still, even though it wasn't being supported at the corporate level. And I'm going to say, just one more thing about that age of Agile at Boeing, the early age of Agile at Boeing. We did not train our leaders. We trained teams. We considered it to be a technical practice. And so I would say that was one of our failures, is that we didn't start with the leaders. And that is something that we are adjusting as we go forward. So here I'm talking about the Boeing Centennial, and actually Boeing turned 105 last week. So it's been 5 years since this happened. So we had big celebrations for being 100 years old, and we started to look at the future and recognize that there's something that we needed to do in order to make it for another 100 years. And so that brought in the digital transformation and looking at Industry 4.0. There was a digital transformation was kicked off. IT was had been kind of heading in this direction for many years, but the naming of it in terms of recognition that this was a digital transformation came here. This was a company-wide effort led by our IT CIO, Ted Colbert, at the time. And Ted got really excited about modernizing the IT development effort. And he got introduced to Pivotal Labs. And so that was the model that Boeing brought in, was Pivotal Labs model, and we created the digital transformation environment. We created labs in 3 to 4 locations globally, set them all up very nicely. There was great culture in there. We had pairing stations. It was all open. It was a sense of community. In some places, they even served breakfast and had everybody do lunch together. Of course, we had ping pong tables, because who doesn't do ping pong tables when you write software and do Agile? And so we would bring teams into the lab, give them the new tools, and then send them home to their old tools, to their old culture, and expect them to be transformed. So now some people were so excited about the lab, they stayed there and they never wanted to leave the lab. And those programs actually continued to grow and learn and start to deliver things. So, we have the big monitors up that showed the build statuses and everything. And I think it was a good success of modernizing the technology and creating a culture. It just didn't translate outside of the lab. And, so you can incubate something, but the transformation needs to come outside when you go back. So it went well for about 3 or 4 years, and then it lost its funding as well. So in another building just down the street, we had this digital transformation, which we then called Second Century Enterprise Systems, decided to go safe. And I remember I was at the SAFE Summit in 2017, and I got a call during the last session, and it was from the chief architect of this Second Century Enterprise Systems, and he said, "Debbie, we need your help. We're going to go all safe, and this organization right now, it's about 2,000 people." And I said, "That is awesome. I'm excited and I'm scared." Because the largest organization that I had ever done a transformation for was about 700. And it was not just me, it was me and several folks from Lockheed and the government that were designing it together. So here I was coming in as the lead for a transformation, and I had to design the whole thing myself and get people, coaches in to staff it for the transformation. So it was all of our infrastructure. It included architecture, enterprise architecture, business architecture, our the resource planning tools, the product lifecycle management tools, our manufacturing infrastructure, and then the program office that was running it. So I did do a presentation on this in the 2019 SAFE Summit. And at that time, we had scaled up to 18 Agile release trains. And of those 18 Agile release trains, there were really 3 or 4 solution trains within it. And so we burst the boundaries of SAFE, and we actually created what we called a super solution train, which was the thing that bound them all together and integrated across the Agile release trains. And part of that was that this was all a business process transformation. And they were already talking about Agile practices, but they didn't have any scaling. So, I saw program leaders doing a daily stand-up with about maybe 50 people on the phone, updating a OneNote for their status from the previous day. And I just kind of shook my head and said, okay, this is great, but this is not to scale. Let's look at what we need to do to make this to scale so that you're not using team level practices at the program leader level. I actually, because it was a business process transformation, when they requested my support, I said, I'm going to create you a Lean Agile Center of Excellence. And I am going to create a model that we can then elevate up to the enterprise. Because if we are truly transforming the way we work at Boeing, then we are going to need enterprise level support for Agile and scaled Agile that we don't have today. And I told them the story I'm telling you about how we had, fallen behind because we had not continued to support it in the way that it needed to be supported. So I did get some leverage on that, and I did lead that effort, and working towards creating that Agile Center of Excellence. So large transformation that I was working on, great effort. While I was doing that, I got a shoulder tap from Boeing Commercial. And there were a bunch of leaders there who had decided that they wanted to use an Agile way of working to build our next commercial airplane. So that was, to me, really exciting. So I'm sitting over here going, yes, I have this really great large scale Agile transformation, doing all this infrastructure, really important. Over here, I have an innovative way of building an airplane using Agile, no software development. And I was like, which one should I do? So I kind of self-supported both, which was kind of crazy. I tend to take on more work than I can afford to do. but they started using SAFe, and we got them started in the right way. We got the leaders trained. I had all the leaders go to an immersive 2-day Agile training with Joe Justice at Wikispeed, and so they learned how Agile could be applied to hardware while they were learning about Agile, and it was really exciting to see the leadership kind of take the lead on it and then be very supportive of it. And they started, I think the first, what they called PI planning, which I would not call PI planning, that I attended, there were 50 Agile teams, not connected in any way, just a random 50 Agile teams trying to do their planning and come to some kind of alignment. The 2 program increment plannings later, we had scoped out 33 Agile release trains, which included probably, let's say about a dozen of what they would call the super solution trains. And then we also had some enabler trains that we had that were really just enabling the implementation and the design of the aircraft. It was challenging to change the mindset, but it was a great experiment, and it was one of the first large scale planning where I actually saw the leadership team listen to the teams and change the schedule, change the master schedule overnight during PI planning because of what they heard the teams say they could or could not do. And so it was a great experiment. It had lots of executive committee visibility, which meant that Agile started to be talked about at the executive level, which if you know about Agile transformations, that's kind of the key, right? You've got to get it up at the top all the way down to where the teams are going in order to make it sustainable and to be able to keep it going. So it was a little a little enlightening there. It was a good way to get started there. And of course, when COVID came along, that program was canceled because nobody needs a new airplane when nobody's flying. So unfortunately, all the momentum that they had, all the information that they had learned about Agile ways of working and how to apply that to building an airplane, really might have gotten a little lost. But I thought it was a really good pivot point for us within the company and for Boeing Commercial to, that was really their first foray into using Agile. We did have, I think, what may have been the largest co-located PI planning event where we had 1,200 people all together in a conference hotel. And we have a really cool picture of it too. So, but I couldn't put that in this presentation. So I was finally getting enough coaches to support the second century enterprise effort and gaining advocacy for creating a center of excellence. So for those 2,000 people, now I'm back in the second century enterprise systems. For the 2,000 people, I created a Lean Agile Center of Excellence with about 28 coaches. To me, that was not even enough because of the massive change in mindset, the effects that it might have on our business architecture, the effects that it would have on our operating model, and how we move with the cadence of that. But it was a good start, and I had great support for it. So I appreciated that. And then finally, I got enough advocacy to create that Enterprise Agile Center of Excellence, which is where I live today. And we held a design workshop in order to create that. So I brought in all of the larger Agile centers I brought in folks from this airplane program. I brought in folks from Second Century. I brought in some folks from F-22 and from our training systems group and from some of our other digital development areas that were still using Agile. And we scoped out what we thought the center of excellence would be. And the VP that I was working with at the time said, "Are we thinking big enough?" So I got really excited. It's like, oh, maybe this could be, but what I didn't want this to be was a Lean Plus initiative. So I didn't want this to be a push. What I wanted it to be was a pull. So that if you're excited about a different way of working, if you want to improve your productivity, if you're curious about what Agile could do for you, then we invite you to come learn more. But I never wanted this to be a mandate and a push across the entire company. And it hasn't become that yet. Now, unfortunately, because you may have heard a small issue that Boeing had with the 737 MAX and having it grounded. And on top of that, COVID came in. The VP that I was working with at the time was assigned to that effort 100%. And so we just went back. We have this bias for continuing to move forward, even if we don't have the advocacy. And so we continued to connect the global network. I became an internal SAFE program consultant trainer at the time, and I was able to start teaching, implementing SAFE internally, so growing my internal SPCs and coaches. Just last year, we developed a coaching academy program, which is a mentor-mentee relationship between some of the more senior and junior coaches within the company, and a series of workshops that we had to get them to understand what a coaching competency is and what all the factors of that competency are, and making sure that I didn't have to continue to bring in consultants to continue our Agile journey. Because of what I did on Second Century, we started, and a lot of that was consultants coming in, and it took a long time for us to get enough funding to bring Boeing coaches in to support that, and it didn't quite work how I wanted it to. So once we created that center of excellence, we decided that no, we need to grow our internal competency with that. So it was good. We got started, but not the right time. It was a tough time for us to kind of be a startup within the company. And in the long run, that organization that I was in actually disbanded, and we were told to go find a business unit to be a part of. And so we did, and we moved into Boeing Global Services, and we started over again. Not completely started over again, because we had our network set up. We had the coaching network going. We were teaching classes. We taught over 2,000 students, probably about 2,500 students every year for Agile. And then we just kind of kept that going. And the great thing is that Boeing Global Services, the CEO is now Ted Colbert, who was the CIO with the digital transformation environment. So he gets Agile, he supports it, and he wants to run BGS using Agile principles. And so we have a great opportunity here to take an entire business unit and grow the competency within there and start to get it to be Agile as an operating model, as a standard way of working. Not to say that everybody has to be Agile, but to say that everybody needs to understand Agile in order to support those parts of the company that are continuing to use Agile. And this gets into understanding how finance might need to change, how HR might need to change, how we need to look at our organizations differently, how we need to look at performance management differently. And we're just, all that's on my backlog, and we're really starting to kind of click away at it and get up to the support. So we still have a lot of disconnected initiatives across the company. in this area, but we're trying to get them aligned and connected together. Boeing's a big company. It's kind of hard to to get that alignment, but we're still there and driving it, and we are going in with this leader first concept, so that we want to make sure that we're getting advocacy from the leaders of the organizations and that they recognize what their role in the transformation is when going to Agile. We are bringing it in as a transformation, not as a practice. So we're going back to the Agile mindset, values, and principles, and making sure that everybody understands what that is. We have translated the Agile Manifesto into terms that make sense outside of the software world. And that was based on our experience on the Boeing commercial program, where when we were training them with materials that had a lot of software in it, and they were completely put off. They were like, this Agile thing, it's just for software, who needs it? So now we've got it defined more in a way that anyone can take advantage of. And we've got, I gave a list the other day, we've got people in supply chain that are using Agile ways of working. We've got folks in, well, my program management core group is using Agile, several business process development, tech pubs writers are using it, and we're just really starting to see it expand outside of software. We even have our factory support centers using Agile ways of working to kind of diagnose some of the problems in the factory and do some root cause analysis and come up with solutions. So we're really seeing the growth and the value of Agile, and really kind of getting to that point where I thought we would have been maybe about 8 years ago, but it's good to see it getting there. And that I think that had we not had that the dark ages, that we probably wouldn't have come out of that as knowledgeable about what we did wrong and what we needed to do differently in the future. And that's my presentation for the day. So it looks like we have time for some Q&A.
I'll start. I'm curious how you guys did the training of the leadership, because I think that's like an overlooked piece of it. So how did you get buy-in for that, and what approach did you guys take?
We're still working on that. So we in a lot of areas we did get I'm just going to stop sharing here. In a lot of areas, we did get the leaders to come in and actually take the training, and you know, spend the 2 days in the class. But it was spotty, right? So now what we're doing is we're basically saying, hey, we have this basic Agile training that we need you to take, because it depends on where you are in the organization as to what kind of information you need. Like, I don't need the leaders of the organization to understand all the aspects of Scrum. So I want them to understand what the value is that we intend to get out of Agile, and then what behaviors do they have that need to change. And so from that perspective, we're looking at creating more of a leadership development program that kind of talks to the behaviors versus getting them to understand Agile down and in.
Great, thank you.
Ken, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Debbie, I was going to ask, so Scaled Agile framework, some people, I guess, are not as much in favor of it as others, including some of those in our customer base. What do you say to people who say that the Scaled Agile framework is just too big, too unwieldy, isn't agile enough?
I say you should see what my organization looks like now and understand that safe is better than that. So it's a stepping stone, and there's a comment here by Jean in the chat too. I see it as sometimes I've said it's my gateway drug into Agile. So when you are so complex and you have all of the rigidness of the organization around you, you need to have a way to step into it if people aren't ready for a complete transformation. So so I bring that in, and then the idea is that I want to look for ways that I can deconstruct that. And that was the biggest thing that I didn't do on Second Century, was I wasn't able to get them to do value stream mapping and look for ways that they could remove dependencies so they didn't have to have that super solution train. I think that SAFe is good when you use it in the right way, and there is no by the book SAFe, which I tell people. So when we come in and we coach people to use SAFe, we're looking for where do the SAFe constructs make sense for us to use, and where do we not need the complexity of SAFe. So that's what we're bringing in. And when I teach the SAFe program consultants, that's what I tell them. I said, as a coach at Boeing, you need to understand SAFe so that you can understand where it makes sense to use it, but also where it doesn't make sense to use it. Ted.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Quick question. Part of the problem that I've seen, and I'm from the banking industry, but I think it may be relevant. One of the things that I've seen, one of these stumbling blocks, is the project management office. They are so steeped in their traditional PMO practices. Now I know SAFe, 5.0, it introduces the concept of an agile PMO. So I was just wondering, I don't know, how you guys handle, project managers or the, agile project management. How do you guys handle that?
Well, the Center of Excellence actually lives in the program management office. And that was how we decided to handle it. So we said that what we need to do is transform our program management office to become more agile. And then because they need to know what Agile is like in order to use it on programs. And then in the long run, we need to know, when do we need a program construct and when could we just use the value stream product-based construct? I think as long as we're in a contracting world with our government programs, we'll still likely need to have that program construct. But with a lot of our internal value streams, we're really looking at making them long-lived value streams aligned to our operational value streams and then funding those value streams. We're still a very project-based right now, but at least I think we've got the Center of Excellence in the right place so that we can start to influence out.
Great.
That was a really great question.
Great, thank you.
And I do see, Marco, your question about pre-existing team culture. We've got it all the time. And there's a lot of, sometimes they didn't have a good experience. And so we just kind of like to go in and do a restart, get them back to basics, get them to understand the mindset and why are we actually doing Agile? What are the benefits that we hope to achieve? What are the outcomes that we hope to achieve? And then slowly start to work on that from a cultural perspective. But it's not just the teams, it's the whole organization. And if the leaders don't get on board with that, then the teams aren't going to feel embrace the self-organization and the self-determination that's needed to really make Agile take off.
Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah. I'm gonna not say this right, Sarumathi.
Yeah, Debbie, that's okay. So we experience or we see that Agile alone doesn't, provide, the Agile ways of working alone doesn't provide the required value for the organization. But when it joins hands with customer-centric design thinking principles and DevOps, it helps us to, holistically produce that value for our customers as well as the organization. So in that perspective, how did you, what was the approach that you took?
That is very much what we're bringing in now. So in the early days, we did bring in continuous integration, continuous delivery, I think, CI/CD, and that was a good start, but it didn't carry forward. And so now we're kind of saying Agile is one way of working, and there are some very compatible practices that go along with it, such as the ones that you mentioned. And we also talk about lean, theory of constraints, critical chain program management, because not everything that we do is software. And so sometimes we need a little bit more constraint around things. So we're basically calling this our next gen program management approach, which is not really program management, but it also brings in engineering, and they're paired together. And so what are those newer lean, agile techniques and practices that we can bring in? We bring in design thinking, we bring in model-based engineering, we bring in set-based engineering, just all of those compatible practices. And so when we talk about the Agile mindset and we do that basic training, we bring up a slide that says, here are some of the compatible practices that go along with Agile. And that's why our transformation now is not just an Agile transformation, it's a way of working transformation. So we're really looking at what's the right way of working based on your context, based on your complexity, based on your product. Natasha.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, my corporation, a lot of our contracts are still done like in a very waterfall systems engineering like method. So I'm kind of curious how you've seen teams lean into doing Agile in their like day-to-day practices when contracts and customers are kind of expecting a waterfall approach.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that we're trying to address right now, because we've had some organizations that have been using Agile for more than 4 years, and they haven't addressed that customer relationship as well as the contracting piece of it. We have some contracts that we've developed that are more Agile, from contracting people to work for us, kind of in a shared services approach. And we've had a couple of really interesting contracts from the government that have been more aligned with an Agile way of working. I had one where I basically said, you are buying 60 story points worth of work, and you can prioritize what those 60 story points of work are throughout the course of the contract. And then if you want more than 60 story points worth of work, you can add on to it. And so I think that there's a lot of new ideas about contracting out there, and this is part of business agility. You've got to get your contracting folks, your supplier management folks trained up and on board so that they understand what things they're putting in those contracts that are constraining you and slowing you down. John.
Yeah, question. I'm curious if you know the ratio of the size of your LACE organization as compared to the size of the members in the Agile projects that those LACE members are helping.
I can tell you it's not big enough. So I have 5 people in my in the Center of Excellence at the enterprise level. And we also support that one business unit. We are not actively coaching programs. So what we're trying to do right now is develop this definition of a coaching model to understand that your Scrum Masters, your release train engineers, your solution train engineers, and your lean agile leaders can all be coaches within your organization to support your transformation. But it depends on whether or not they're actually doing that. Are they a full-time release train engineer with like 10 teams, agile teams that are supporting? They probably don't have time to do a whole lot of coaching. And so we will likely recommend that we have one coach in those larger, more complex organizations, whereas in the smaller ones, the RTE might be able to be that coach with support from the Scrum Masters. And then we are really trying to bring our Agile leaders and program leaders and managers up to speed on becoming Lean Agile leaders and coaches themselves, rather than having them assigning work to people. But it's going to take us a while. There's definitely still a lot of learning to do. And it's great that we have support from Ted Colbert, because every time that we have a program out there and we're talking about the problems that we're having because of Agile, he says, well, have the program managers been trained? Do they know Agile? And so it's really great to have that kind of advocacy from the CEO to help us. I know there's a Brian has a question about in the chat about where do you see Agile long-term strategies and philosophies. Honestly, I would hope someday we're not using the word Agile. I would hope that we're really looking at enabling flow in our organizations, decentralizing decision-making, and just having that more organic organization. I know when we build big things, that's going to be a challenge and a reality, but I'd really like to see us just ingrain this into our culture, and understand that there will still be some things that need to work in a more traditional way. And I think, when you look at what PMI has been doing over the past couple of years, they're really kind of shifting a lot of their training materials as well from the more traditional project management to what they call Agile project management, which is a good step, but we still have to kind of get the culture piece in there as well. Sarumathi?
Yeah, I have another question. So when we organize our people and our teams around value streams and arts, the biggest challenge there for them to be operating in that way is going to be budgeting and funding. So I would like to know your approach towards implementing the lean portfolio management concepts and principles within the organization, and how did that take the first step?
Yeah, and that was something that I attempted to do on Second Century Enterprise Systems. They already had a portfolio concept there and a construct that they were using, and the idea was to take lean portfolio management and start shaping the way that was working. I'm still not sure that's happened. They claim they're kind of working along value streams now. It's not what I'm hearing from the grassroots, so we'll see how that looks. Now, I do know that we have at least one other organization that has holistically implemented the lean portfolio management, and they seem to be having some good successes with it. And then within Boeing Global Services, I have at least one place where I plan on piloting that this year and bringing in our finance organization so that we can start to shift that financial model and see how that looks as well. So we're really attempting to do that.
Great, thanks.
And John, did you have another question, or still didn't lower your hand from before?
I did not. I'll
Okay.
clear that. Thank you.
So I think I've answered all the questions in the chat, and doesn't seem to be any more hands raised. So we're about at time.
Thank you, Debbie. That was great. Thanks for all what you presented to us, and thanks everyone for attending. I'll be sharing the recording. The recording is already live on YouTube, and I'll be sharing that with everyone. Apologies for who didn't have the chance to attend, as the limit of my Zoom license was over. So thanks a lot, and see you next month. Thanks a lot, Debbie.
Thanks,
Enjoy.
Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for organizing this.
Most welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Debbie.